All right, thank you very much. Welcome again, folks. And we are in our last free class for March, and this will continue our theme of fantastic florals. Actually, continuing our theme of fantastic French florals, because all the painters we're looking at are all French and all relatively of the same era. Today's is Henri Fontaine-Latour, a sort of, I guess, a pre-impressionist, sort of bridge the gap between kind of more academic and classical painting and into the impressionists, but did a lot of really wonderful paintings with this theme. So we are going to definitely nod to him and do one of his paintings as our project for the day. So we are working in oils. If you have acrylics, I know a few of you have been working in acrylics. That totally is fine, with the usual thing that they dry faster and you have to kind of paint accordingly. So let's have a look at our supplies for today. They're pretty standard for this month. We've done oils 3 times. So you've got the Artist Loft titanium white, yellow ochre, raw umber, cerulean blue hue, brilliant red, medium yellow, and then we'll have an oil painting medium. I mix my oil painting medium with a little bit of linseed oil to make the drying time a little bit longer, so my paint is a little more fluid. You don't need oil painting medium necessarily. Today's painting won't really be too reliant on that. So that's probably one that can go by the wayside if you don't have that. And then you're gonna need a rag or paper towels or both. And I'll show you what I'm talking about with paper towels in a minute here. It's good for soaking up excess oil out of your paints. And then a container to put your medium or oil or anything else that you kind of want to sit off to the side. Variety of acrylic oil and paintbrushes. I always put a variety because it is good to have some rounds, to have some flats, and to have some filberts and variations thereof. All the other stuff, those little shader brushes and fan brushes, I actually have never used any of those before in my life. I pretty much get away with rounds, flats, and filberts, and filberts being my particular little favorite. And then we are going to be painting with oils. So you'll need something that has been treated with gesso. Acrylic gesso most likely would be your best bet. And you can paint on cotton or linen, canvas, wood, cotton or linen canvas, and then wood or paper. And then, of course, having that layer of some sort of medium, I should say gesso, is kind of an imperative for that, especially with oils. And then you'll need a disposable palette to put all your stuff on. So that's your list. And then here is the painting that we have on tap. And this is Henri Fontaine-Latour, Spring Flowers, 1869. So this is basically right in the heyday of the Impressionists. And in this painting, if you look at this artist, some of his stuff from earlier on, like maybe say the 1850s or something like that. I'm not actually sure of his age. I don't know how old he was at this time, but some of his other paintings look a lot more classical and more polished and more blended. And the Impressionist era, 1869, being the more or less the beginning of the height of Impressionism in France. You can see the brushwork is a little looser in this one if you get a chance to look at some of his other works. So with this painting, if you want to do the screenshot, if you want to do a search of that, Spring Flowers, 1869 is the title. You can kind of work with that off to the side, and that will be that'll be good. Okay, before we get started, I do want to give everybody a little bit of a warning. If you were here last week, I had some kind of shaky technical issues. I've updated everything, reloaded stuff. It's still a little wobbly. You can see what's going on. Everything's there, but it is it is less than perfectly still. So I don't know, just pretend you're on a boat or something like that. It's, you know, you can, you know, see what's going on, but it gets a little shaky. And I know most of you are kind of actively painting while this is going on. So hopefully it won't be too much of a distraction. I do apologize for that, but I have spent the better part of a few days trying to figure it out, and nothing. We even tried rigging something up behind me to make it go upright, but that didn't work either. Okay, so with that in mind, let's have a look. So you can see there's a little bit of a wobble, but it's not horrible. Okay, and as always, if you do have questions, just put them in the chat, and they will be relayed to me, and we can go over that as they come up. So just let me know. All right, so you can see I've got canvas. I've got it taped down. I actually recycled my tape from last week, being the environmentally conscious painter that I am. And I have stained that. This is gesso on top of it. It's actually a pad. It looks like this. So it's a canvas pad. I've shown this before in previous classes, but 9 by 12. And there's 10 of them. So you can just sort of tear them out and then tape them down. If you don't actually have to tape them down. If it were watercolors, I'd say tape it down. I just do it to stabilize it so it doesn't go all over the place. And it's probably easier to do it, but it's definitely not a necessity. So that's what I'm working on. And I have stained it my kind of usual sort of neutral earth tone, just to get rid of the glare of that really strong white canvas as it appears on there. So I'm just going to pull up my bigger image here. You can't see all this. It's less than exciting. All right. So there, I think we are ready to go. And I've got my paper towel down here. So I'm going to, when I pour out the paint initially, I'm going to pour it onto here so that the paint, it pulls the excess oil away from the pigment. So for this instance here, you can see a lot of it kind of bubbling out right there in the beginning. So I just do that, and what will happen is the excess oil gets absorbed in there. That is something I've been doing for years, and it just saves so much of a headache, and it's super easy to do. Don't need any special equipment. I'm just actually going to put out a few colors here, just in the initial stages, just so they can sort of get rid of that excess. I like to have my paint as kind of desaturated with oil as I can before I start it, so that it is not all that runny. See, this one here, the yellow that I took out, had very little excess oil, but there'll still be a little halo of all that oil down there, as you'll see when we get to it. So I'm just putting the 3 primers out here, and this one's got a little bit, sort of an in-between amount, but still excess. And then of course we will be using white, titanium white. Back in the day, these old French painters, this is actually the era where they first started using kind of manufactured paints in tubes. Before, they would just get powder and mix oil with it, and each day they would have exactly the amount of paint they would use. They didn't have a tube like this. They would have to make all of their paints themselves. So Henri, our pal Henri, would have probably been introduced to tube paints at this time. Just a little sort of historical footnote there. All right, so I'm just going to let that soak up a little bit and then get it down on the palette. So it's gotten rid of most of that excess. And I should have gone from light to dark, but oh well. Red, yellow, blue, and of course white, but I'm going to wipe it off before I do that, because as soon as I put it in there, it's no longer white. There we go. And this is pretty much all you need. I mean, there are there are definitely, as you will encounter as you shop for supplies, there is tons of paints, secondary colors. I mean, here's this 24 set that I've shown you too. This is all kind of earthy tones, and then there's kind of more a row of secondary colors and then primary colors, more or less, throughout here. So, you know, you can get countless amounts. And there are times definitely when you want that. Like I mentioned last week, blues, you know, there's probably 6 or 7 really common blues that you can use, and they create different greens, and they create, you know, different variations, oranges and things like that, based on if it's kind of a more sky blue like this one, or if it's more of a darker blue, an intense blue like a phthalo blue. So there's definitely an advantage to it. But in a pinch, if you're on a desert island, these 4 colors will get you pretty much everything you need, certainly in the painting that we're going to be working on. So simpler is better, at least certainly in the beginning, if you're just sort of starting out. All right, and I'm going to start the usual way that I do, and that is by just sort of sketching things out in a very, there we go, we'll use this. We'll use a size 5 round brush, part of these nice cheap little sets here that you can get for, I don't know, 10, 12 bucks. Michaels sells them. They never run out of them because they're pretty much the sort of standard issue entry level brush set. So you get a ton of brushes for a really kind of minimal amount of money. And in this stage, this is probably where I will use some of my medium. And like I said, this is just medium mixed with a little bit of linseed oil. And I'm going to use my little old standby here, the raw umber. All right, and I'm just going to do a quick little sketch. And for something like this, there's a lot of moving parts here. I mean, oh, do I start with the daffodils or the hyacinths or whatever else is in the background there, maybe lilies? I am thinking of this thing as a whole series of one big shape. And if we look at it, it's kind of like, it kind of goes up like that, sort of like an inverted triangle, like a ice cream cone. So I'm just going to sort of figure out where the bottom is, how high I'm going to go up. Like this will probably be the top of those hyacinths, maybe a little bit over there, maybe a little bit over there. And then the width, it doesn't go all the way to the edge, but it goes pretty close. And it's pretty much right in the middle where the widest part is on the right and the widest part on the left, something like that. So now it's basically, now you just connect the dots, right? Easy. How difficult could it be? But this gives you kind of the lay of the land. This is like your road trips. Like, okay, I'll start in Chicago and then I'll go to Memphis and then I'll go to Phoenix and then I'll go to California and kind of work your way around like that. Instead of just, oh, I'm just going to start randomly driving around and hope for the best. You've got a plan here with something as simple as this. Make it easy on yourself by keeping things, at least in the beginning, very simple. So I'm just going to use this. The vase is probably a little bit more than halfway. So maybe right about here. I could measure it. Well, I'll say it's about halfway. So this is where that little yellow daffodil is going to be, that one right over there. So I'm just marking that as kind of a midway point. And now it's just a matter of getting these shapes right. So you got a real kind of nice narrow neck here. So I'm just trying to get this shape right off the bat, because it is the most stable. I guess that's an odd word for it, but it's a shape that you can identify pretty readily. So it's this kind of a fluted neck here, and I'm going to just sort of map out, get a little bit more paint on here. Let's map out these daffodils. They are daffodils. Yes, they look like daffodils. Just giving myself a little sense of where They are. There's some nice little circles here for the center of the flower. So I'll just sort of start vaguely doing that. Throw this one out here. I don't like to go in, you know, kind of full bore right off the bat with a lot of color. I just like to get the kind of structure of it, the drawing aspect of it. And you've probably heard, and so if you've taken some of the drawing stuff with Adrian about, you know, keeping things simple, get the big shapes. Same thing here. And so I'm applying a lot of that general drawing attitude towards the application of this one as well. So, you know, I'm not trying to draw every flower. I'm just kind of making little marks. All right, and then over here we got another little daffodil that comes out. It's kind of a nice little flute shape there, like a trumpet. And these look like red irises, which is kind of weird. Don't see those very often. All right. And maybe just sort of block in a little bit of the values. These flowers right in here, these daffodils, the yellow flowers, they're probably the lightest thing in the whole painting. So I'm just going to kind of define their shapes a little bit more by going around and just blocking in some of this dark. Not worrying about the color, just doing more of a value study. Any painting done before 1800 most likely would have been done like this first. So it would have only had, and with this color no less, it would only have had one color, usually a green or an earth tone, and then it would have only concentrated on values. No colors really to worry too much about at this stage. And that it was precisely for the things I've been talking about, just to sort of get the general structure of things, and, you know, get sort of the lay of the land. So I'm just doing a little value in here. I'm going to maybe leave this open. And the good thing about oils is because it stays open so long, if you want to kind of go back and work a little bit reductively, you can kind of, I want to get that reflection at least blocked in. Although this was probably the painting part of it by Latour would have been, he would have added this white slash at the end. So I don't really need to do this. It's more of a, from a technical standpoint, but from a reference standpoint, it's super helpful just to sort of know where things are. And then there's a little shadow here. And one major piece of the puzzle that I have not tended to yet is that little kind of background horizon there of the edge of the table. So something like right here, it's kind of right in the middle of this curve. Just something like that. All right, and that's probably enough of a reference here to get it. And things to look for. I haven't really talked about this a lot because I don't have a ton of time for these 1 hour ones, but this is something that's really important, is that I do a lot in my own painting, is before I go any further, I'll look at it and I'll go, okay, all right, is this in relation to this about right? And it is about 50-50, and I'm just going to do it on my screen here. And yep, it pretty much from here to here is an equal distance. So the flowers are about the size of the vase. So being able to determine that, then you can maybe do the width as well. Just sort of look at the width and compare it to what I've got here for the height. And, you know, just looking there and there, this is about right. So you can kind of double check your work. If you find it helpful to get out a ruler and kind of do those things to really, you know, if you have a trouble kind of judging those proportions, just getting a little, you know, on this little ruler like this and just going, okay, let me check at that. check that. And you can do it through, like if you had this set up on your tabletop, you could kind of use the ruler and just measure it over there and then transfer it down here. If you're, you may have to scale it up or down, but it's all about proportions. How much of this covers this? And they're pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio and pretty close to 1-to-1 ratio here as well. So, whatever system works for you, everybody's got their own little particular way of going about it. But do what you've got to do to get those proportions right, especially when you start, if you start drawing portraits and things like that, like if the head's like 2 or 3 times too big, people are going to notice that right off the bat. So get those things sorted out. And then you'll be in a much better position kind of moving forward when you transition into color. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, since the color I've got on here is very similar to this tabletop, and this tabletop encompasses a fair amount of space here, I'm actually going to start right here, and I'm going to mix this up. So I've got to do a little color mixing now. So I'm just going to stick with this because I've got sort of the root color on here. So I'm going to take a little bit of brown. It's very earthy down here, but that's not the right color. It's too dark for one thing. And I think this is a little bit brighter and warmer. So I'm going to take a little bit of red and just kind of incrementally pull some of this down into it. Again, just trying to match the color at this stage, not the value. It's not too dark or too light. This seems to be about the right color. It's got the right amount of red and it's got the right amount of earth tones, but it does need to get lighter. So I'm going to tint that by adding a little bit of white to start with. So I'll just take a little dab like that, put it in there. Oh, that's too much. Good thing I have more of everything else. I'll take some of that. Now you see how that's just a little kind of almost too gray. So that's where the red comes in. It kind of brightens it up a little bit, almost kind of like a salmon color. I don't know if you can see that, and it's not really helpful. So I think about like that. All right, and now I'm just going to block it in. All right, that's a little bit dark, I think overall. It'll get lighter. So now I'm just kind of going back to this shape and I'm going to try and kind of carve out the vase a little bit more. Not using really any medium to speak of. The flowers will probably be the last thing that I do in this. And I know there's, everybody wants to get to the good stuff, to the flowers, but it is a painting and you are responsible for everything. Right? Nobody has, if you've got kids, you don't have a favorite kid. They're all equally important. So you got to get all elements of the painting involved and working. That seems to be pretty close. I'm gonna go up in size with my brush simply because it's a fairly large space, and I'm going to go to a flat. I'm going to go to let's see, size 10, and this is a bristle brush, which is a little rougher, so it'll be good for covering a lot of space. So I'm going to kind of have to go back to the beginning here and mix up a little bit more of that color. There we go. That seems pretty good. Again, keeping the palette simple makes it very easy to mix up a color like this. If I had 12 colors on here, that'd be 12 more things that could go wrong color-wise. So keep it simple. And if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to ask. There we go, just blocking it in. Using the brush, there, if you look at the the painting here, there is a little bit of a horizontal texture. So I'm just using my brush to kind of recreate that. And, you know, kind of trying to maintain some, it looks kind of like they're going for a little bit of the grade of the wood, or the grain of the wood, I should say. That's a little bit lighter, but I think overall I do want to get a little bit lighter. And I think what we've got going on here is the background. Now that's actually the table shaking. So any shaking going on now is because of the actual table. So I'll just throw in a little bit more white. I might even throw in a tiny bit of yellow because it's warm. It's pretty warm. So I'm not going to be there. It's a little bit more orange. Let's see how that looks. Yeah. There, that's pretty good. So what I was saying is from here to here, I think this is going to get more yellow, but I'll tend to that later. Up here, this is basically a variation of this color. It's just a much lighter version of it. So I'm just going to start, and this is the way, you know, I don't get out a light meter or anything like that and kind of measure how things compare. You know, over time, you sort of develop an eye for how the color reacts. And so I'm just seeing kind of a lighter version of this color up in here. So I just added white to that. It's kind of a pinky, kind of a nice warm, more neutral pink. It'll come back, don't worry. It knows where it's like a cat, it knows where it's fed. But all I'm doing here is just blocking in that background light pinkish color. Come on, be good. Now I'm just mixing it up. Get a little bit more here. All right, adding the white to lighten it up. There we go. And we're back. And there we go. So it's probably a little bit pinker. So maybe add a little more of that brown to kind of mellow that out a little bit. That seems pretty good. So you saw how I just put it over top of what I've already established here, just to give myself, you know, an idea of how close or how far off I am. And that's pretty much where I want to be. So I'm just going to start blocking in the rest of this all around. Just giving a little bit of a buffer as I go around the bouquet here, just in case I want to. I mean, this color is pretty easy to mix up. So all of these colors are going to be a little bit more complicated. So I'm just giving myself a little bit of leeway. It's kind of working my way around the outside. This is probably a little bit too pink. Yeah, it is, but that's fine. I will tone that down. This will be a good lesson in muting your colors. So what we have here is an issue where the color that I'm painting is a little bit, too intense, meaning it's too pink, and it needs to be a little bit more neutral, more like a gray. So I'll do that. This was good, a good opportunity to kind of explore that issue, which will come up all the time. You'll put something on and you'll look at it and you'll go, wow, that looks like the surface of the sun compared to what I'm looking at. A little too bright, a little bit too intense. I think the value is right. Might be a little lighter. And when I say value, I'm always talking about lights and darks. That's what that means. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and neutralize this. So make it more gray. So you can always add an earth tone to do that. So I just pulled some of that raw umber in there. And then the other thing you can do to kind of neutralize a color, make it more gray, is you can add the opposite color of it. So this is sort of on the red, this color right here is sort of on the red end of the spectrum. So it is a you know, it's not a true red, but the opposite of red, if you look at a color wheel, is kind of it's a green. So this will be sort of on the green end of things. So I think a lot of people might be kind of intimidated by the idea of putting green on in the background, but I am going to do it. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some yellow ochre, which is another color that I like to use. And we will definitely use it at some stage. I didn't put it on my paper towel because I've moved that off to the side, but I can adapt to that. So I may throw a little bit of yellow ochre in there and then a little tiny bit of blue. So blue and yellow make green. And this is going to neutralize that color. Blue, yellow. Don't want to go too far like I'm starting to do here. And then we need to get some of that red back. So it's still warm. Yeah, and it's kind of hard to see. Let's just do a little close up here in this corner. But you can see there that is in the ballpark of what we're doing here. I still want to go a little bit lighter. So I'm going to add more white. That seems to be more like it. So, and the other thing you have to keep in mind here is I've already got a lot of that pink down. So it's kind of automatically blending with it. So if you ever need to kind of do something like I just did and change a color on the fly, keep in mind, especially with oils, that you're going to be doing a mix with whatever is on there because it's wet, it's still open, and it's very much susceptible to whatever whatever color is down is going to mix with whatever color is on your brush. So you kind of have to be aware of how that all works. So just throwing in, again, that opposite. Give me a little gray, needs to go a little lighter. But there's still enough sort of pinks in there that if a few of them kind of peeked out, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. So that's a better, I think that's a better color. I think everything looks slightly darker on the screen that you're looking at. But here I've got a lot of natural light coming in the window. It's looking pretty bright and pretty light. But if I wanted to kind of lighten it up, just sort of throw some white in there. And the Impressionists, although Fontaine-Latour is not considered an Impressionist, or at least certainly not one of the founding members, he was sort of like on the fringes of that movement. The brushwork is nice and loose, so it kind of plays into that. So that's looking a little better. All right, so now I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna try and do this, the vase. It's another big piece of the puzzle. So I'm gonna put down this one over here, getting another brush, maybe another, I'm gonna use this one. So this is a number 4 round bristle brush. It's a little bent on the end for whatever reason, but that's gonna be fine. So this almost looks black, but to me, to my eye, there's a little bit of blue in there. So I'm going to mix up a really kind of dark blue. So I'm going to take some raw umber, and I'm going to take some of this blue here, the cadmium, or no, the cerulean blue hue. Yeah, I think this is actually going to work out quite nicely. And then I'm just going to lay it in there. And I'm putting it on pretty thick. And it's kind of reading like a green. The funny thing is with color, this is, to my eye, I don't know if you can see this, that's looking somewhat green, but I'm not going to shy away from it because this is all the stuff around it has got a lot of red. So what happens is red and green are complements of each other. They're opposite on the color wheel. So what happens is, if I'm putting this down and I've got all this red, if there's any green in here, it's going to kind of pop out because green and red are complements of each other. They sort of make the other one more intense. So any of the green that's in the color that I'm laying down is gonna appear even more green. So that's what's going on here, and it's kind of hard to see, but that's sort of plays into the idea of color being really relative. You know, it's, you know, this is green because it's got red around it. If this had, you know, like a blue or something, it might look more black. So it really, it's really dependent on the colors that are around it. So there we go. So just blocking this in. This color is actually really good for a lot of the darks in here, but I'm just going to add a little bit more brown just to kind of separate it from that color there. So this is just raw umber and the cerulean and cerulean hue. And I'm just going to kind of go in where I did all these darks, at least initially, because I've got this color out and it really fits pretty closely with what I've got on my brush at the moment. I'm a painter. I would, you know, if you had to attach an adjective, I said, I'm a very economical painter. Like don't say, all right, I'm going to do this flower now, and then I'm going to go to this flower. I'm going to take whatever paint on here I've got and, you know, make the next transition that makes the most sense. So it's kind of a painting, sort of a convenience thing. I've just got this paint here and I'm going to move to the next spot. It's kind of working. And because it's got sort of an element of green into it, it's really playing in to kind of a lot of the foliage that I've got going on here. So for instance, like as I go out here, you'll notice that these leaves get a little bit, these branches, leaves, yeah, they're called leaves, I guess, of the different flowers, they get lighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to maybe use a little bit of medium instead of, you know, like trying to add white or yellow to it. I'll just add a little medium and just apply a thinner coat. So it sort of gets me the information I want, and I don't really have to worry about mixing a ton of color. I just sort of use, like, this is sort of the more darker green, this is a little bit more of the lighter green, and then later on I can come in and sort of add these highlights. But for the time being, I'm just using a little bit of medium to kind of signify where maybe the lighter bits of the various leaves are in this painting. But right around here, there's a lot of that. You guys are so diligent today. If you got any questions, remember, you can ask. And then there's a little bit up here. Da-da-da. All right, so I'm trying to keep this whole area kind of open for the time being because of those real strong yellows. A little bit of, I'm going to get a lot of mileage out of this dark because there's quite a bit throughout here. A little leaf right there. I'll just do this little hyacinth stem up there. I think it's hyacinth. Can't remember. All right. So we've got a really good, we've pretty much got the full range of values in this whole painting. We've got the dark here, and we've got all these lights in the background. So we've got the breadth of what we're going to paint now. I think I'm going to work my way back now color-wise. So the next color in terms of value, so the next lightest color from this color is probably those reds. So I'm gonna work on those for the time being, and I'm going to use a flat just to kind of mix it up, and a small one, a 2. I could probably use to trim some of these. It's got one fiber that's like almost 50% bigger. I'm just going to pull that off. Oh well, try to anyway. All right, so I'm going to take some of this red. This is that brilliant red or bright red. I forget what it's called. And it's got a little bit of earthiness to it. So this is too bright. This is, you know, like stop sign red. So I'm just going to take some of these earth tones, a little yellow ochre, and then a tiny bit of the brown, just to kind of mellow it out a little bit. So it's red, but it's not like crazy red. It's not neon red. These are pretty spring flowers in France, and you know, something that glows in the dark would probably not be appropriate for that. So we'll just do that. And I'm going to give it, I'm going to push Fontaine Latour into the Impressionist era fully, and just use a lot of really kind of loose brush strokes, because it really kind of suits what we need to get done here. So let's take a little bit more red, mix up some of these earth tones, a little bit of that. All right. And then if you need
I have
a
a question
darker,
for you.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry. Sammy asked, any tips for when you don't mix up enough paint, say for the background initially, and have to make more, but can't get the color quite right?
Oh yeah, yeah. That'll happen. That happens quite a bit. I mean, the easy answer would be just try and mix up enough initially. But the question is more like, what happens if that doesn't happen and you can't get it? That's why I think it's really important, especially if you're just kind of in the early stages, to keep your palette simple. Because, you know, if I had 4 or 5 different reds, you might go, oh, let's try this red and see what happens. And it could completely change the dynamic. But if I know that I'm dealing with like 3 colors and it's really just a matter of proportions, that's going to make all of that decision making so much easier. So keep your palette simple. You know, most of, you know, the famous painters, especially of sort of yesteryear, you know, Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci and Raphael and Titian and people like that, they had a really simple palette. They didn't have a ton of colors. And there's a reason for that. Part of the reason was paint was really expensive back in those days, or certain pigments were anyway. And it's just easier to kind of be consistent with your color. All right, what else we got here? I think that's about it for the reds. Let me keep that. Now I need to go back to that dark color because I missed a bunch down here for whatever reason. I was a little too conservative with the amount of paint that I use. So I'm going to come back and just put a little bit more in this, some of this red. You got to be careful with this because, you know, this could instantly become a red stem if you're not careful. And the other thing is I'm just going to mix up. I'm going to get a really small brush here. And there's a lot of this pink here that's going to go kind of in between things. So I'll just take some of that and just kind of do a little surgery. You can see I lost a little bit. Kind of come around. Oh yeah, see, you got to watch out for that. So just kind of get a little heavy with that paint where you need to. But just kind of working around the shapes and in between the shapes a little bit now that we've sort of defined things a little bit more fully. Again, another instance where keeping a simple palette is going to be super helpful. Stuff like this. You know, those little in-between spots. Do this occasionally. I mean, this is something that could really suck your time and energy, and you sort of lose sight of the whole picture. But, you know, I'm starting to kind of get a few things up and running at once. So, you know, being on top of it with multiple brushes, and so you can kind of come in and do a little tidying up when things get a little messy. All right, I'm going to go to the yellow now. I'll save the purple for last. I'm not quite sure why, but that's just the way it worked out. So I'm going to use some straight bright yellow, but I'm also going to use some more earthy yellow ochre. And I'm just going to try and find, this is probably more in keeping with kind of the center parts. So I'm just going to, you know, kind of that part of it. So that looks about right. So I'm going to do the yellow kind of in two parts. Sort of the darker ones and then the more kind of pastel elements. And again, going full impressionist here, just kind of blocking this color in big swaths. Let's see, we got some down here. I may end up adding a daffodil or two more. All right. Okay. Let's see here. A little bit more. This is kind of a darker yellow. I missed quite a bit over here. It's all right. We'll make it work. A little yellow right there. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up the lighter areas. So it's a little brighter. So what I'm talking about are the areas kind of around that center, that bright center, or that earthy center. I'm taking the bright yellow, and I'm going to add some white. So it's going to be warmer and more almost entirely to the white end of the spectrum. As I'm looking here, it's like, wow, those are really, really light. So I'm taking a lot more white, and then I'm just going to start throwing some of that in here. That's really pretty bright, but they're bright flowers. And I'm also applying this really thickly. So this is called Impasto. We're going to work on this next week, playing with the texture and the thickness of your paint next week in the premium class. If you're interested in that, we're going to do a Van Gogh painting. But, you know, building up texture and, you know, sort of changing, everything's been fairly thin so far. And now we're really getting into kind of a nice heavy application, especially for these daffodils. And some of these are a little, not quite as bright. They're a little bit more subdued, kind of maybe in the shadow a little bit. So I'm just trying to get little touches here. And when you do these heavy applications, you know, this real kind of thick, and what I'm going to do here, just off to the side, I'm just going to make this a little bit more gray, because a lot of this is the stuff that's really in the light. And now I'm just going to go for it. It's still a white. There it goes. It'll be back. It's still a bright yellow, but it's a little bit more subdued. So I'm gonna make it a little bit more kind of in the gray end of things. I'm just gonna take some of that. Actually, some of that background color I think works pretty well for what we're trying to do here. So this color up here, and pull it into this yellow, and just make it a sort of a tone down. Well, there's a lot of it kind of over here. I think we're going to have to do a little preparation over here. Let's see. There's a lot going on in this particular area. And then here, over here, I'm going to go back to this center yellow again. I missed the flower. Don't want to do that. Where was it? Was it like right here? Yeah. Like that. I'm going to throw another one in here just because I've got it and because I can. And I don't think he's going to mind. So I think this painting is in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. So when we all start traveling again, going to museums, we can make a list of all the ones we've seen or we've done. All right. Let's see what else. What am I missing? Oh, I know what I'm missing. Missing another sort of more earthy one right in the middle, right here. Let's get a little bit of a close up here. There we go. Sorry about that. It is a little shaky now. Okay. Now I'll go back to the brighter yellow. And I'm interchanging pretty freely between these three colors here, the yellow ochre up here, the bright yellow, and then the white down at the bottom, which you can't see. But it's a fairly close triad of colors. So they're relating pretty well together. Okay, let's go back. There we go. That's better. Now I'm going to come back with some of this, the kind of the outline color. I'm going to do a little preparation. I'm just going to actually take some of that yellow. So a little bit of that, a little bit of that, a lot of that. Kind of got to mix it up a little bit. And the good thing, alluding to that question that somebody asked about trying to mix up that color exactly the way you had it. Impressionism is not, there's a lot of things about it that make it demanding, but it's not super demanding that the colors be totally unified. Although I did get it pretty darn close in this particular case, because the color was a lot of times was very broken, meaning, it wasn't blended very fully. You can get away with subtle shifts in color as long as you're using more or less the same general palette. So I'm getting some pretty good mileage out of this kind of pinkish color and just sort of coming back and tidying up some of the stuff that, I made it probably a little wider across here, and now I'm kind of shortening that up. Now come back here and do the same thing. So you can kind of work your way back. I'm actually going to leave this fairly open because this is all going to be the purples. But we got some in there. So it's just kind of, ooh, got a little yellow snuck out. That's fine. So it's it looks like this area is a little collapsed, but that's the way it's doing it up there too. So it's pretty consistent with what's happening in the painting. So now I think I'm going to go up to the purples. We've got a few minutes. Should be just enough to mix this up. And I'm going to just, for kicks, going to do a round synthetic, sort of smooth brush, a synthetic sable is what they're called. And I'm going to try and mix up this purple. So I'm just going to take some of this red, take some of this blue. I said it in the wrong order, but you get the idea. And then this is going to be very light. I'm going to put a lot of white in there. Maybe a little bit more blue. Maybe a little bit more blue. Even a little bit more. And just a touch more of red. No, that may have pushed it over. I think I had it. All right, we'll see how that looks. Again, the purples can be tricky because they rely on blues. Blues I find to be one of the harder colors to mix. That's pretty close. So I'm just almost painting each little flower almost individually, like each brushstroke is a flower. So I'm trying to maintain somewhat of a consistent approach. And that's, for something like this where you got big flowers here, smaller flowers up here, sort of in between, using a different size brush to get the right mark can really make the difference. If you're using just one brush for everything, it just looks like a series of very similar marks. So break your marks up, make things a little bit interesting, and play with the mark making. I think I mentioned that last week, and it's really something good. Now I'm just going to mix up kind of a darker version of this because there's a few spots kind of in between where it just kind of breaks. It's broken up a little bit. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm painting, there's usually a time where it's like, oh, I really got it. Things are really coming together. And for this one, it's like, okay, I think things are coming together. But be prepared. If you're honest about your painting, you'll come back maybe in an hour and go, oh, I don't know what the heck I was thinking. That's not looking so great anymore. So be willing to kind of be critical with yourself. But the key is knowing what's not working and what is working is a huge part of making that kind of self-critique effective. I mean, there's a lot of people that go, oh, I can't paint, it's terrible, it doesn't look good at all. That's not productive. And also, oh, wow, this is the greatest painting ever made in the history of Western civilization. That's not terribly productive either, because there's probably something we could find. So always be willing to look at what's going on and see how to maybe make it better or adjust it or something like that. All right. Oh, and last but not least, we got to put our little highlight down there. So I'm just going to take a nice big thick swath of this white over here, and I'm just going to lay it right in. Give that little reflection. There's a little kind of halo around it. It's probably a bit much, but it's a good final flourish. There's one like that. And if you look at that and you're going, it's not quite right. This to me looks too big. You can always go back and work it back in. So something like this. And this is going to be an instance where we're going to have to use a lot of paint because I put a lot of white on there, or a lot of white. So I'm just going to try and make this thick and just get a sort of a running start and kind of go downhill, work back into it, get a little more paint. Yeah, that's not so bad. It's a little bit more reasonable. And if you look, get really close, you can see how much paint I've got on there. Just come down from the extreme close up, but there's a lot of paint in there, and underneath it there's a lot of white, so I got to be really careful because it will come up. It's kind of like an excavation. You dig deep enough, you're going to find maybe things you don't like. There we go. Okay, I think it's maybe time to have a look and see how people did and maybe answer some final questions. That was a fun one. I always enjoy these kind of impressionist paintings. So
there was a last minute question.
Yeah, go for it.
What were the colors you used for the reddish flowers?
The reddish flowers were that bright primary red. So I think it's called brilliant. Yeah, brilliant red. And then I put a little bit of yellow ochre and raw umber just to make it not so red. And that was it. It's pretty straightforward. It's, probably 80%, maybe even 85% of that red, and then just a little bit of those earth colors to kind of soften it up a little bit. And here we are. What medium is used with the linseed oil? I used, in this particular case, Winsor Newton, the liquid. All right. So we got some people showing their stuff. Kylie. Oh yeah, that looks great. You went full blue with the base. Much more expressive with the color. Yeah, that works great too. Yeah, very nice. Anybody else we got? This is my last free class. I'm sad to say. I would love to keep in touch with you folks. If you want to go to my website and get on my mailing list, I'll be doing stuff. And we got Allie. Oh yeah. All right. So you got it blocked in really nicely. So those nice little kind of trumpet shapes are going to be really easy to work into that yellow. Again, big, easy shapes. And Louise. Oh yeah, that looks really nice. You got a lot of nice texture in those flowers. The paint was pretty thick, it looks like, in spots anyway. Yeah, that's nice. You can get a lot of texture with some nice heavy impasto paint, which we'll be concentrating on next week in the premium class, if that's of interest. Anybody else? There we got Tia. Oh yeah, very nice. Oh, you got the really nice subtle colors in the background. Yours is even a little bit grayer, and I think that's a little bit more accurate. I think mine was a little too pink, so nicely done. That's a tough color. Those sort of in between muted colors are so hard to get sometimes. Sarah, oh, nice. Very nice. Very loose. Kind of got a lot of nice brushwork in there. Very good. And there's Diane. All right, yeah, got it nicely blocked in. And everything's ready for a little elaboration if you so choose. It kind of works. It looks almost more like a Matisse painting. Very, very, everything looks very purposeful, all those little marks. Yeah. Let's see, anybody else? Very nice job, Diane. That looks great. Susan. Yeah, really nice. You got the nice sharp edges on those daffodils. That looks good. They really sort of burst out with the shape that you got them. It's kind of almost spiny little petals they have on there. That looks great. Anybody else? Very good, Susan. Thank you so much. And you went more purple in that background. I like that. And there's Sarah. Very nice. Oh yeah, the daffodils look great. You went a little brighter with them, but the center is like more yellow, and then the outside more like intense yellow, and then the outside is more of that kind of pastel yellow. I really like that. That looks good. Very cool. All right, anybody else? Cindy. That's a great job, Cindy. You got sort of more of an orange hue to those reddish flowers, which works good. Orange and purple being opposites of each other, it works really well with those hyacinths up top. Anybody else? Findeman, that must be your last name. Oh yeah, really nice. The daffodils look particularly good. And it's kind of like an explosion right out from the middle. It's like the daffodil is kind of the center of it, and then wow, everything radiates out from that. Yeah. Anybody else? I think Harriet is. Oh, that looks good. Really? Did you do that by yourself? Nicely done. Really good job. Excellent. Oh, that's right. I saw you. You were on my screen, so I saw you working. You were doing a great job. Nicely done. Number 25 and 26. That's all I've got. J and D. Oh, yeah, nice. Nice loose start. Keep it simple in the beginning. Big shapes, big swaths of color, and then hone yourself in, and you can get as crazy detailed as you want. But if you've got the main structure of the painting, you're well on your way, and you've definitely got it there. JND. Bargavi. Oh, very nice. Yeah, I think if you went around those yellow flowers with even some darker colors around those yellows will pop right out even more. Nicely done. Yes, thumbs up. And Polly, oh yeah, you went green with the vase. I like that. It really contrasts. See how that green and the tabletop there really contrast with each other. That's sort of a warm, cool thing, almost a complementary color. So nice job. Yeah. Hello's pad. Yeah. Oh, good. I like the shape of your vase. It's much more substantial. That's gonna hold up even more flower. You can put some sunflowers in that vase. That looks good. Nice. Well done. Suzette, got your basement workspace. It looks like you're down in the dark. That's great. Ooh, very nice. I love the contrast. Really dark, really light, cool background, or some of those cool greens, and then those bright yellows popping out. You really got that part. And those reds occupy kind of that middle ground, sort of a lot of in the mid-tone stuff. Yeah. No, I'm as far as I know, if people are asking questions, I really appreciate it. Let's see, Connie, what do you got, Connie? You gonna show me?
I don't think she wanted to show.
No.
She kind of
Okay.
hunkered down after I thought she did.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. There was a few questions about sort of what my future is. I'm going to do one premium class next time, but the free classes are done. I'm sorry to say. I wish I could stay on, but I live very far away, and it's been kind of, I guess, an issue. But if you're interested, you can always go to the website there and get on my mailing list. I'm planning on doing stuff like this, maybe on YouTube and things like that in the future. And then Instagram is another place where you can catch me. So if you want to keep track of things that way, that'd be great. I'd love to sort of see what everybody's up to. And thank you all very much. I've loved these classes. And who knows, maybe I'll make like a celebrity guest appearance or something like that. I don't know, maybe not a celebrity, but a guest appearance anyway. So thanks everybody. And thanks for all the kind words. I've had a few people message me. I really appreciate that. And I hope to see you next week if you're able to do the premium class. Okay, take care. Have a good week. Bye-bye.